In the heart of Columbia, Tennessee, East 8th Street, a place called The Bottom, once thrived as a vibrant black business district, a beacon of entrepreneurial spirit and community pride. This historic hub, nestled in the shadows of downtown, was the epicenter of the pivotal 1946 Columbia race riot, a watershed moment in post-World War II America. Columbia, Tennessee, a city once woven with Southern charm and long-term hard work of aspiring black men and women, was brought down to ashes and rubble by only 2 fateful nights of unrelenting terror. Homes, once warm and welcoming, all lay in smoldering ruins, their charred remains a haunting testament to the destruction. Main Street, once the pulsing heart of the community, was transformed into a desolate expanse of shattered glass and splintered wood, a graveyard of broken dreams. The human toll was staggering. Lives lost, futures extinguished, and scores more forever scarred by the horrors they witnessed. Some fell to sniper fire, their promising lives cut short in the prime of youth, like autumn leaves ripped from their branches. Others succumbed to flames that engulfed their homes, their screams echoing through the night, a chilling serenade of suffering. The lucky ones had fled, but the memories of that night would haunt them forever. The sounds of shattering glass, crunching wood, and anguished cries still echoing through their minds like a perpetual nightmare. The acrid smell of smoke and sweat hung heavy, a constant reminder of the terror that gripped the city. Columbia's soul was battered, its people shattered, like fragile porcelain dropped on concrete. But amidst this devastation, a haunting question would linger. What in the world would have sparked such an inferno of hate in the first place? Before we continue with this important part of American history, kindly support our channel by hitting the thumb button. Share with your friends and families to help spread our eye-opening black narrative, and consider subscribing to our channel if you're yet to. Your support means a whole lot to us. Now, let us get into the digest proper. February 25th, 1946, was the day the spark ignited. James Stevenson, a battle-hardened World War II Navy boxer, and his 37-year-old mother, Gladys Stevenson, visited Kastner Knott, a local department store, to collect their radio that they had dropped there for repairs. On getting there, they discovered it had been sold to another customer. When Mrs. Stevenson didn't go and insisted on getting her radio, William Fleming Jr., the store employee and clerk, confronted her using racial slurs at the same time, trying to abuse her physically. However, James stepped in to defuse the tense confrontation between the two. Unfortunately, Fleming's aggression shifted from the mother to the son, thereby provoking a physical confrontation. As tensions boiled over, the altercation escalated. The brutal fight reached its climax as James brutally beat Fleming Jr., sending him crashing through a glass window. There, razor-sharp glass fragments tore into his flesh, leaving him severely injured. Seeing this, other white men who were in the vicinity jumped into the fight. It was at that instant that Gladys Stevenson, James's mother, got struck in her eye. As the fight intensified, the white neighbors would call the authorities, who promptly arrived at the scene. On arriving, they would take Fleming to the hospital while the police chief, Walter Griffin, and Officer W.C. Frazier arrested the Stevensons with a charge of disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. The initial Daily Herald report of the incident would quote Chief Griffin as saying that the Stevensons admitted pushing Fleming through the window. Griffin would also say they had also cut Fleming with fragments of glass. Before World War II, such an incident may not have occurred, as James Stevenson might not have felt empowered to defend himself. But as blacks across the nation served alongside whites in the military, they discovered a world much different than their segregated hometowns. And having risked their lives the same as white soldiers, they felt they deserved similar respect. The news of the incident had spread rapidly. Fleming's injuries would be escalated by the rumor mill. The Stevensons were already in police custody, and the black community feared the worst: social lynching. They were not going to permit another social lynching. The term social lynching comes from a statement that a black businessman and community leader, Julius Blair, made at the time of the Stevenson incident. Blair recalled that after the earlier lynchings, the parties responsible for the lynchings actually would have parties in which they cut up the rope that was used. The horrible lynchings were turned into a social event, hence the term social lynchings. Initially, the Stevensons would be taken before a magistrate. They would both admit to fighting. Gladys Stevenson had said that she had fought back, and each was fined $50 plus court costs. They didn't have the money to pay immediately, so they were held in the county jail till they could pay up. After they had paid each the sum of $50, they would be released. However, the incident was still far from over, as it had already unleashed a maelstrom of hatred that would haunt the community. Unsatisfied with James's punishment, Fleming Jr.'s father, William Fleming, would take matters into his own hands. Later that same day, he would secure a warrant for James Stevenson's arrest, charging him this time with a more severe offense, assault with intent to commit murder. Julius Blair, a prominent African-American businessman and community leader, would at this point try to propose a peaceful resolution between both parties, bypassing law enforcement involvement. But William Fleming would, however, reject the option, fueled by a desire to assert racial dominance and maintain the existing power dynamic. The entire situation had begun to raise tensions in the minds of black individuals too, as crowds of white people started gathering in the town square to discuss the incidents. The African-American community would hear rumors on the next line of action by the white community that they were planning to lynch Stevenson. Adverse to a lynching, the black community, comprising many veterans, would begin readying themselves for self-defense upon hearing the news about the planned lynching of their colleague. On the other hand, the white citizens would order that the businesses in the Mink Slide, the African-American business district, turn off their lights. And then they wouldn't wait for the order to be carried out. They would begin to shoot out the street lights, also cutting off telephone lines. At night, a white mob would gather around the Maury County Courthouse, their anger and hatred simmering like a pot of water about to boil over. Meanwhile, black citizens and military veterans had converged on the Mink Slide, the segregated black business district. Their anxiety could be read on their faces. They knew what had always happened to black economic properties whenever there was trouble. They were going to protect this one with their lives. The sheriff would request assistance from Governor Jim Nance McCord, who sent the Highway Patrol and Tennessee State Guard to Columbia. At first, the Columbia police chief would dispatch 4 patrolmen to the scene. But when shots rang out, the officers were left wounded. Following the attack on the policemen, the city government would swiftly request for state troopers, who were promptly dispatched to Mink Slide. Upon arrival, the troopers outnumbered the black patrollers. Tennessee State Safety Commissioner Lynn Bomar and his men would surround the Mink Slide district, and in the early morning hours of February 26, 1946, they would storm the area, firing randomly into buildings, cutting down phone services to Mink Slide, stealing cash, goods, seizing guns and rifles. That one night, only that one night, over 100 blacks were arrested, and nearly 300 black-owned weapons were confiscated. In no time, the county jail was overcrowded with black suspects. Painfully as it sounds, none of these individuals were granted bail or allowed legal counsel, leaving them vulnerable to the whims of justice. On February 28, 1946, Maury County deputies descended upon the prisoners, determined to uncover the truth behind the shooting of the policemen. Eventually, 28 black Colombians were indicted on attempted murder charges. Ironically, the Stevensons, whose actions, along with Fleming's, had ignited the fracas, never stood trial. 3 black men, James Johnson, William Gordon, and Napoleon Stewart, would be singled out as prime suspects. The police questioned them all day without counsel. As the interrogation intensified, Tennessee Highway Patrolmen arrived, their presence ominous. They whisked the trio away to the sheriff's office, accusing them of firing at the officers. But in a stunning reversal, Johnson and Gordon would skillfully maneuver their captors, seizing their weapons from them and unleashing a hail of bullets at the patrolmen. The response was swift and deadly. The patrolmen returned fire, killing Johnson and Gordon in the burst of gunfire. Another prisoner who was allegedly trying to escape during a transfer was injured, while Stewart miraculously escaped unscathed. Amidst the flaming chaos, a cry for help would go out. The owner of a funeral home managed to call Nashville and ask for help from the NAACP. Walter White, executive secretary of the NAACP, and Thurgood Marshall, the organization's chief legal counsel, answered. They rushed to Columbia, determined to defend the remaining prisoners against the tide of injustice. With Thurgood Marshall as the lead attorney to defend Stevenson and the other defendants, they were able to gain a change of venue, but only to another small town where trials took place throughout the summer of 1946. Marshall was assisted by 2 local attorneys, Zephaniah Alexander Luby, originally from the British West Indies, and Maurice Weaver, a white activist from Nashville. Veteran attorney Zephaniah Alexander, Luby of Nashville, and attorney Maxwell Weaver of Chattanooga joined the fray, bringing their expertise to the fore. The stage was set for a trial that would test the very fabric of justice. 25 Colombian blacks would face charges of shooting at white policemen in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. The outcome hung in the balance as an all-white jury deliberated. And then, on October 4th, 1946, the verdict came. Thurgood Marshall was able to obtain acquittals for 23 of the black defendants, and only 2 out of the 25 defendants were found guilty, even with an all-white jury. But in a surprising twist, the charges were later dropped. One major reason for this was that the people of Lawrenceburg were embarrassed that the trial had been relocated from Columbia, where the main incident had happened. The Columbia race riot of 1946 was a harbinger of the turbulent 1960s, a decade marked by urban uprisings and the unyielding pursuit of equality. The embers of resistance sparked in Columbia ignited a civil rights movement that changed America forever. According to historian Dorothy Beeler,
the Columbia race riot and the reaction to it were major events of the late 1940s, which helped create a base from which black organizations gathered strength for the civil rights push of the 1950s and 1960s.
Also, Maury County's historian Joanne McClellan doesn't call what happened a riot either. She and other historians would struggle to find an appropriate word to describe it. During a recent interview, she had said the word uprising was more fitting. McClellan said the day's events were a turning point in American history.
People lose sight of the big picture. It was not a riot. What they were doing was standing up for the right to be treated as a human being. It is about respect and treatment as a citizen of the U.S.
McClellan said. The clashes between the white store clerk and the Stevensons and black residents and police represented a cruel juxtaposition, reflecting the reality many young black veterans faced after returning from fighting overseas in World War II. In the decades following, the incident was largely ignored, only discussed in hushed tones around the community. According to some longtime city residents, a dark part of history rather forgotten. The return home was a battleground for social change, a second war fought by black veterans who had only recently returned from overseas, as Gail Williams O'Brien details in his groundbreaking book, The Color of the Law: Race, Violence, and Justice in the Post-World War II South. This time, the conflict took place on their own soil, defending racial equality amid the lingering effects of slavery, ensuing aggression, and the painful history of several lynchings in Columbia. They were defending themselves, O'Brien said on History's Hook, a podcast hosted by Maury County Archives Director Tom Price. Many media outlets at the time failed to highlight state law enforcement's role in storming a black neighborhood, where stores and property in the Bottom were destroyed. Today, amidst downtown's revitalization, the Bottom stands as a testament to time's relentless passage. Once bustling streets now wear a faded cloak of neglect, a stark contrast to the thriving development elsewhere. The echoes of prosperity and progress seem to have bypassed this storied district, leaving behind a haunting silence. That brings us to the end of yet another video segment. Did you learn a thing or two? Then reach out to us in the comment section to share thoughts. We can assure you that we learn a lot from them. Support our works always by hitting that thumb button, share with your friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe to stay with us. Thank you for watching.